Hello, and welcome to Skeptic Hangout, the place where we sit back, relax, and chit chat about intriguing and sometimes controversial topics through the lens of skepticism. We are Richard, and Laura, and today we are discussing the universe. So grab your English tea or your flat white coffee with cream and join us as we talk about literally everything. This is episode 61, the universe. I must have got my numbers off.
So I feel like by the end of this episode, my brain's going to be crying because every time I think about all the ideas such as the universe and all of those sorts of things, you know, when like a computer's running out of RAM and it sort of slowly grinds to a halt, that's what happens to my brain when I think about all these ideas.
Do you ever get like, when you're thinking about something so vast and so ridiculously incomprehensible, do you ever get sick to your stomach? Like it's almost like so much that you have a physiological reaction, or is that just me?
In the same way, I think, as you know, like if you're walking and suddenly you look up at a really tall building and you suddenly get that sort of, I don't know if it's vertigo or if it's whatever. I get a similar sort of physical feeling in my stomach when I think about big things.
Yeah.
I was watching a TikTok the other day, the source of all of my worldly knowledge.
Oh, good.
It was a video talking about the Hubble Deep Field image. I don't know if you two are aware of that. So they pointed the Hubble telescope at a patch of like dark sky that they hadn't really seen anything in before. That's like a tiny
little dark patch in the sky.
Yeah. And they looked at it for ages and ages and ages, took in all the light, and they saw like tens of thousands of galaxies in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it showed on the same video one section of one galaxy. So whatever the galaxy is that's closest to us, it showed just one section of it, and like zoomed in on all of the it was Andromeda. So all of the stars that make up that galaxy. And then when you think about the fact that, I don't know, it's just these numbers, isn't it? Like
they're incomprehensible.
The number of stars in that one galaxy, which is a small galaxy that just happens to be near to us, was just so mind-boggling to then think that that was just one of all those 10,000s in that tiny bit of the sky, which then was replicated all. It just crackers.
It's absolutely insane. Yeah. I think that just shows that the amount of knowledge that we have about the universe is a pinprick compared to the knowledge. And we think that we're really, really like spun up, like, oh, we're so far advanced from all those ancient cultures who just thought of it as like the firmament, which is like this dome around the earth, right? And they probably had this concept that was really somewhat small in scope.
My brain can cope with the idea of a firmament. I'm on team firmament at the moment, I think.
Like it's comprehensible. It's something that you can wrap your mind around and you're like, okay. But then people started asking the question of like, well, if it's like a balloon, then like, or they didn't have the word balloon back then, obviously, but like, well, then what's outside of that, right? And that, so no matter how you look at it, there's this element that's like absolutely mind-boggling. But we have the term universe, and now there's this term like multiverse, right? And in case there's like a bubble and there's multiple bubbles and all this other stuff. And so I don't know how you guys wanted to approach the universe, but I kind of think of it as like our concept of what the universe is keeps changing. So I kind of think of it as like everything, like whatever exists is the universe. And then when you start talking about multiverses where there's pockets where they're isolated from each other, that gets pretty confusing pretty quickly. So, I mean, like, what is your guys's, like, for example, people used to think that the Milky Way was all there was in the universe. Like that, the stars that we see visibly with our eyes, that's all there is to see. And so it's a bit like intimidating to think of what we haven't even discovered yet.
Yeah, last time we discussed this kind of topic, we had Kyle Brewer on, and who's kind of does really good science shorts on his channel. I think, generally speaking, I don't remember who said it. I don't know if it was Carl Sagan who kind of distinguished between the local representation of the universe, or the visible universe, and what is possibly beyond that. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of distinguished it between what we know of the visible universe being the universe, and the sum of all things as being the cosmos.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not sure if it was Carl Sagan or not, but it's his name that's springing into my head when I'm saying that.
I know, right? I bought it right off the bat. I didn't even question that. That just goes to show once you have like a level of
skeptical of you, Laura.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh yeah, he probably said that. No big deal. Well, skepticism and cynicism are two different things. I can kind of have a little bit of trust in some things, but you're right. It could have been Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't know.
But yeah, that's how I kind of envision the universe is kind of what we know of, or what we can, the extent of what we know. About the universe, which currently, under the current kind of most favored model, goes back to Planck time, and then obviously we don't know anything before that, or even if there is a before that.
And I'm starting to wonder, with the vastness of the universe and all the things that we've discovered, and how there are some things moving in different directions here and there, which actually does kind of make sense, even with an expanding universe. But my thought is, do you think that we'll ever like reevaluate the Big Bang and the age of the universe and stuff, knowing how vast it is and how much we're missing and not understanding? Like, do you guys think that time and that model is going to change anytime soon?
I feel like at some point it must, not because I mean, I'm no cosmologist, but like, not to say that there's anything necessarily wrong with what we've got, but like, all it takes is that one like switch in technology that enables us to analyze things in a different way, or view things in a different way, find a missing piece to a puzzle that we didn't even know was missing. And I think that's what's brilliant in terms of when you're looking at these fields of science. So we've talked about this a lot in terms of, the scientific method and what good science can be. All it takes is that one discovery, that one flick of a switch to just be like, gosh, we didn't know this and now we do. And for people to just update all those ideas and, adapt to those new ways of looking at things, which is brilliant.
Yeah, I think that we're, again, and I don't know enough about it, and I certainly don't enough to critique whether that will change. I suspect it will, because that's not the only model that we have anyway. It's just the kind of the one that's most favored at the moment. I suspect it will, but I think this will do something very interesting, just in kind of philosophical notches, because I've talked to people before about things like the Kalam cosmological argument,
our favorite,
wherein they rely on kind of scientific knowledge to try and evidence their claims. Now, the difficulty with this, and it's not just the Kalam, but it also goes back to the Big Bang itself, when you get kind of theists citing, or Christians in particular, citing the Bible, where it says in the beginning God created, and then they equate that with the Big Bang. Now, there's a problem there, because if that science, and it almost said when then, if that science does change, if what we understand does change, then what they're grasping as evidence will dissolve.
Right. Yeah.
And that's problematic in those situations. But of course, it all depends on whether it does or not.
Well, so that's an interesting point that actually kind of goes off topic. And I want to come back around to the topic of the Big Bang as being like a changeable or malleable model. But what that says, because a lot of the Christian beliefs are obviously different for everybody. There's people that accept science, don't accept science, accept bits and pieces. But that particular piece, they're simultaneously saying, well, science doesn't know everything, while at the same time validating that scientific belief. So what they're doing is they're saying like, well, God is beyond our scientific comprehension, yada, yada, yada. But, the scientists are saying Big Bang, therefore, look, God did it this way. Like Big Bang is the mechanism that God used. By doing that, they are validating in religious circles a scientific concept that further solidifies it as like this is going to be in our cultural sort of like brain, right? As the accepted scientific model. And you're right, there's other models out there, and tying it back around to the scientific like whether or not the Big Bang is going to change, or the model of it, the explanation of it. I really think the language is already there in these conversations for changes like that to happen. Like, it's not like it's so solidified. Like, our understanding of evolution is pretty solidified, and gravity is pretty solidified. It can be fine-tuned, it can be changed a little bit. We can be wrong here and there, but the overall concept is pretty solid. Um, with Big Bang, there's enough of those other conversations out there that it wouldn't be quite so mind-blowing if there were changes to it, whether it's fine-tuning and just tweaking it, or whether it's throwing it out the window altogether. I think that our brains are already open to that idea or that concept, at least in the scientific community. That what the religious community is doing by accepting it in the Kalam, or not the Kalam, because that doesn't it by accepting it in general, is solidifying it, making it harder to challenge in the population, like within the public.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting as well that I'm not so sure whether this is something I'd have to look at. I'm not so sure whether it is that there are other ideas out there that kind of alternative models to the Big Bang, or whether the Big Bang is kind of quite solid, but it's whether it's the beginning, which is the kind of contentious point, and whether the other, because I know things like there are kind of multiverse theories, which kind of suggests that the Big Bang may have happened, but may have come from another universe which preceded it. And then there are other ideas which suggest that the Big Bang was the beginning of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of I'm not sure how tenuous the Big Bang as a model itself actually is.
No, that's a good point to clarify, is meaning the Big Bang, meaning the start and beginning of absolutely everything. That is what I think is going to continue to change.
Or our local,
yeah.
Is it the start of everything, or is it just simply the start of our local
of our particular universe? Yeah, and I've heard theories like that our universe exists within a black hole, and it explains certain things. Like, I can't remember if it's dark matter or dark energy. Now, obviously, I just kind of heard it loosely in context of other conversations, so I can't like really speak well on it. But there are other ideas out there that still involve, there's like this expansion, there's this quote unquote start, but it really expands our understanding of A, what it means to be the beginning, and B, what that looks like, whether it's just local or whether it's quote unquote universal, for lack of a better term. Right? Like,
there is no better term in the context of this conversation.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing when I say that.
I really like your comparison to things like evolution and what was the other one you said, Laura? You talked about evolution,
gravity.
Yeah, those sorts of things. Because I think in a lot of ways our knowledge and understanding of those things improving or developing will come from, I guess, more, maybe not gravity, but let's say evolution. Us understanding evolution better will come from discoveries more than technological advancement, I would imagine. And so, like, as technology advances, we can discover more and more about the universe, and that's going to be the driving force with that. Whereas other things where it's like evolution is kind of, is accepted as how the world works in terms of the changes in sort of animals and whatnot through time. But we'll just discover more about things in the past, and maybe maybe technology will help us to analyze things in different ways or what have you, but most of it will just be finding the links between things more, and the more we find, the more we know. The James Webb Space Telescope that's just been shot up there the last few months is like an example of a really promising thing that will hopefully, give us more information. One thing I absolutely love about space is the fact that we can only see it because light travels to us, so we see things in the past. And so I really like the whole idea of, like, if you get a certain distance away from the Earth, you would look at what the Earth was like 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Like, you get so far away from the Earth if you had a good enough camera, and you'd be like watching the dinosaurs roam about. Stuff like that really impresses me. It's not really what we're talking about, but I like it.
No,
that's part of that mind-blowing thing that you mentioned, that you both mentioned at the start of the show, isn't it? When I mean, even the fact that when you start talking about the universe, you have to change your kind of units of measurement because it's that intensely big. It's just huge. It is everything. And it started, if the Big Bang is correct, it started at every point in the universe. Because we kind of had this idea.
Expanded away from each other.
Yeah, we kind of had this idea that the Big Bang was a region or a point, and then we expanded, and we're like billions of miles away from that point. But the Big Bang happened everywhere in the universe.
But then my brain is just screaming like...
Yeah, and then you get into conversations about nothing, like what actually nothing is.
If we're expanding, what are we expanding into? If that's not the universe, what is it we're expanding into? And I can't cope.
Yeah, no, it is mind-boggling. And like I want to go back to like Gil's point earlier where he talks about like when we're looking out into the stars, we're looking out into the past, right? So you think about thought experiments, and I'm a very like creative, very imaginative person. And so I think about that, and I think the universe right now as it actually is, right? Like we don't observe every single thing at every single moment, but like if you imagine every single thing at every single moment and being able to look down on it and see it, it looks completely different from what we see in the sky right now. And that like if we see a nebula, that happened millions, maybe even billions of years ago, right?
That star has been dead the whole time we thought it was alive and we never knew.
Right. No, that's a good point. We could be looking at stars that they could die today and we won't know, but probably ever, because in our human, like, I don't think humans are going to make it millions or billions of years. I just don't have that kind of faith in us. Maybe we will, but we may never as a species observe that particular star dying.
Maybe there are no stars left. We look up into the sky at night and maybe all of those stars have gone. We wouldn't know for like thousands and thousands of years.
Or however, however.
Based on that, I want to ask you about something. But before I do that, I kind of want to just jump in really quickly and say, we kind of had, or certainly I do, have this idea of like these great scientists who are working on these equations and stuff, stood on a whiteboard and just scribbling on a whiteboard right up to.
No, it's got to be a blackboard. It's got to be a blackboard.
And chalk. Yeah.
And kind of writing these equations out and working in isolation and being these great geniuses. But of course, these are teams and teams of tens, if not hundreds of people who are doing this incredible work. And that's why I think, to me, it's so important to get kind of that perspective especially into the kind of naysayers, those people who don't believe in kind of the science behind what's going off. That this isn't just a guy who sat in a room with this singular idea.
It's Bill Nye. He's the guy. Bill Nye.
These
single-handedly
teams of people. Guy. I mean, if you have a look at the kind of the image that was created, the first image that was created of the black hole.
Yeah.
Of a black hole, that was many teams of many people in different subject areas working together to produce that image. And
but there are these like, since you're going to bring the black hole up, there are these individuals who are key, right? And like individuals who kind of like put that little piece in just the right time and just the right way that they advance an idea further, like exponentially. And in the case of the black hole, it was a young woman. So I'm just going to stop here, throw this out. It has nothing to do with the universe. I'm just going to give her a little bit of credit here for a second, because not a lot of people
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to.
Ah, good. Okay. Yeah, no, that just really excites me. I just had to like, one up for the women.
No, because when that happened, the kind of press came out and she was the kind of poster girl. And the press came out and she got quite a lot of negative press, and they were all mentioning one of her fellow team members as kind of being instrumental and trying to insinuate that she was kind of nothing to do with it and it was all his work. And all credit to him, he came out And he said, that's all bullshit. You don't take credit away from, this team member.
Yeah.
She's as instrumental as anybody else. We are a team. Everybody is vital to this thing.
Yeah.
And how dare you come out and say it's my work when she's as instrumental in this thing as I am? And that was brilliant that he did that. And it showed that just how close these scientific communities are.
And how much humanness is involved in it, right? Because you're talking about that controversy is human controversy, right? Like, the need to or the want to have credit or share credit or the inability to share credit. That's all like human bullshit. And so that translates into the scientific community as well. And I know it kind of gets away from the conversation of the universe.
No,
but
it's really important though, because the thing is, we get a lot of the misunderstandings I see from people, and cosmology is something I've got an interest in, but I've not got a particularly great amount of knowledge in it. I've got a passing layman's interest in it. But one thing I notice about people who misunderstand things in cosmology are that they kind of they read these kind of like press release kind of things, and they take that as the science rather than. And we've talked about this before in the show a long time ago, where we were talking about kind of research and stuff, where those press releases, those popular science magazines and those newspapers are good for getting people interested in science.
Yeah.
But you've got to read past the headline and kind of dive in and do a little bit of extra research if you want the full picture, or if you want to even begin to understand it properly.
Jonathan, my brain can't cope with the full picture. We've discussed this.
No, headlines. Yeah, headlines are about as far as we get, though. I don't understand. No, but you're right. Like there might be a headline about like alien object found in space or whatever, and you read it and it's like a comet that came from another universe, and not a universe, another galaxy, and is entering our galaxy or whatever. Solar system. Holy shit, people. Okay. So a comet that came from another solar system and is entering our solar system, right? So it's very mundane once you start reading it. It's those eye-catching headlines that get people in to click on it and read it, and then you're like, oh, this isn't at all about what I thought it was about. Still interesting, don't get me wrong, but I think that goes a long way with like science misunderstanding and miscommunication, because not everyone is going to click on every single article, but they're going to remember keywords and key phrases, and that can be hard. So
science education is something I'm really, really passionate about. I think we need more of it.
Yeah, I focus a lot of my educating on the kids on science, and like do less things like what a noun is and stuff like that. But no, I think that when we talk about our knowledge of the universe, this kind of ties in, although it's a little bit off topic. But what you're talking about is the difference between scientists writing in scientific papers and journalists. And journalists write to keep their jobs, right? They write to educate the public. Don't get me wrong. Like a lot of them are good intentioned, but they write to get the people's attention. They write to get the clicks, and they might love a subject and be passionate about the subject and not know enough about it to write on it correctly. Or so a lot of times, like there's misunderstandings, miscommunication.
Although I've got to push back just a little bit, just on the account that I know that Kenneth Leonard's good wife is a journalist who has a lot of integrity. So shout out to Mrs. Leonard.
Oh, I like that. And I don't want to say that all journalists or any journalists don't have integrity. Yeah. So shout out to her. And if there's anything we can link for her, we should do it. A lot of times I would say when it comes to scientific communicating, I would give the journalists the benefit of the doubt that they are doing their best. What I'm trying to say is when they're trying to communicate a really complex thing to an overall general population, a lot can get lost in translation. And they are trying to write it to be entertaining.
The reason behind a lot of those articles is literally because something has happened and they've got a deadline and they've got a certain number of words to write and they just need to write about something. And in a way, you can be kind of forgiving of the fact that sometimes, I don't know, like even just writing about it and bringing some sort of understanding to people is a positive thing. But obviously then some people are writing very specifically to educate people in an understandable way about something with lots of research and understanding that goes behind it. But I guess it's hard as well because like to the point where we're at with lots of the science here to do with the cosmos, to do with the universe, it's hard and big and complicated, or very, very specific on one thing, which actually is not headline grabbing and not exciting, but it's still fundamentally important to everything. So I can understand why journalists would, go for an asteroid the size of Nevada. They're always the size of US states, aren't they? Yeah, that's
we're very
two conspiracies here.
Okay,
One conspiracy, asteroids being the size of US states and that stars don't exist. Those are the two conspiracies I'm starting tonight. Sorry, Joe.
As I brought this kind of subject up and I interrupted myself from what I was going to say, I want to go back to my original subject because I really want your opinions on the end of the universe.
I'm all for it.
You're pro heat death.
I don't know enough about that subject. Do you want to just explain more about what that is before I give you an opinion on it?
Yeah, okay, so there were different ideas about the end of the universe, how the universe might end or indeed not end. As far as I'm aware, the prevailing idea is the heat death of the universe, which is that the universe has so much energy in it. And at some point, that energy is going to run out. And when that happens, there's going to be it's going to kind of drift apart into an eternity of nothingness. so essentially, all the energy it's going to carry on expanding. The energy is going to not run out, but be spread so thinly.
But that sounds like a similar thing to the way stars die anyway. So that the energy in there slowly runs out, the fuel runs out, and then it just kind of gives up on itself.
Yeah, and in the heat death kind of idea, it is just a case that it will spread. The universe will expand so far that eventually all the stars will be so far away from each other there will be no light, and they will all eventually die. So all that's left is from if we were there, from our perspective, would be almost literally nothing.
Yeah,
because it would be so few and far between each particle, right?
Yeah.
That there's
heat death is there's no heat then left. There's just particles there.
There's no energy left.
Right, because heat is just the movement of particles, right? That's what heat is. And so the particles become still. It's almost like sort of an absolute zero kind of scenario, but also that they can't interact with each other. There's so much distance between them that there's no interactions, like where the gravity pulls them in and creates these larger objects. Like everything would break down.
Can I just say I've spent so much time in my meditations actually going into the kind of the idea of this thing and being an eternal creature and sat there while this happens.
Like watching from the outside, kind of?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. How amazingly kind of lonely that would be for eternity.
Yeah, so Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, they have this place they can go to and there's a restaurant, right? It's like the end of the universe. And it's kind of funny to me because it's like it's this happening place, right? Like it's got stuff going on there. And whether you're thinking about the physical quote unquote end of the universe or whether you're thinking of the heat death, like the end of time of the universe, in neither case would that be a place like a restaurant or to see anything. Because if you think about it, there wouldn't be anything. There's just nothing to see. And no one to observe said thing that's not there. Right. So that's
the closest I can get to my mind conceiving of nothing.
Yeah. But still your mind puts it in what? A black room, right? Like your mind is conceiving this black space that has nothing but why black, right? I know that black is the absence of light and stuff like that, but
the universe will evaporate to nothing but mauve.
Yeah, it's all pink
until all is mauve.
Yeah, I like that.
If I just want to interject, by the way, that if our viewers who kind of missed the start of the show keep seeing a ghostly image appear on Gil's video, it's not a confirmation that ghosts exist. It's that Gil's son keeps just popping into shot every now and again.
Hello.
So there were more than kind of ideas than the heat death is different scenarios, big bounce, big crunch, all that kind of thing. So in general, on the end of the universe, what are your thoughts?
So I don't know enough about the whole universe, multiverse, the theories that are out there. It really is very mind-boggling to me. But when I hear the explanation of heat death, it makes sense to me. Like okay, we're expanding, things break down, stars die, they dissipate. Like there is sort of this like system of things feeding other things.
Let me just recommend a book to you.
Here he goes.
Gil saw me go into the bookshelf. Katie Mack, The End of Everything.
End of Everything. Yeah, it just kind of makes sense. I would never say that, like, even with Big Bang, I'm very flexible. I'm like, sure, I get that. I can comprehend it as the current model, and I can kind of regurgitate a little bit of what I've learned about it. But I'm not like a follower of it, right? It's like, it doesn't make enough sense to me, and I don't think we know enough, and it's not fine-tuned enough for me to be like, yes, this is absolutely how things are. And so it's the same with the heat death of the universe. That particular theory makes sense to me. As things continue to break down and break down and break down, as energy is lost, like, even when we say, like, the death of a star, even that's not its actual death. It's transforming into another form with lower energy and another form with lower energy, and it gets to be forever before, like, it's so mind-bogglingly long before a star actually doesn't exist anymore, in the sense that it's dissipated so far away from itself that it's not recognizable as an object or a body or a cloud or anything.
Yeah.
Like, that takes mind-bogglingly long amounts of time. I think that's gonna be the word of the day, mind-boggling and incomprehensible. But
when we think about the things that we said earlier in terms of, like, we know a lot about the Big Bang, but then, like, we don't know how or if it started or whatever else, questions about that, then I think quite naturally sort of then lead you to think of questions about the end of the universe, in terms of, like, well, is it all just on one big repeat cycle and we're going to loop back around again? Is it that the universe can only stretch so thin and then whaps back in and crashes into itself and starts again? And I think, and I'm sure those are the words scientists use.
Whap and crush,
yeah.
It's called the big whap and crush.
Yeah. Trademark.
It should be called the big whap and crush.
Sounds kind of kinky, actually.
But it's one of them where, like, your description, Gilliver, of the heat death of the universe, I think, like Laura said, it makes a lot of sense. I can foresee something like that sort of playing out. And there's also part of it, and it's ridiculous to feel like this because it'll be long after my death anyway, one would hope, but it feels bleak, doesn't it? That sort of an ending of the universe, of everything just sort of slowly becoming darker and colder and more spread out, isolated, thin on the ground. It feels bleak, but then again, there probably won't be humans anyway by then. The sun will have already expanded and everything on Earth will have died.
Surprised if there are humans in 50 years now.
I mean, at this rate, right? No, so I know we're not doing commercials anymore, so this might be a good time to interject. Like, these concepts, like the heat death or Big Bang and what model fits best or whatever, these are great questions for people, if you're listening now, to go and discuss on our Facebook page. Because there's a lot more opinions out there than just us three, and there's probably people out there listening who are a lot more knowledgeable. Cough, Kyle, cough. So I think it'd be interesting to see what other people think in terms of how we think the universe will end. Like, the big, like, swap and crush, right? What mechanism would pull the universe back together? Like, those kinds of questions. Like, sure, I get the theory is out there, but what is the mechanism that backs up the theory that would actually make it work?
God gets his hands around it and just sort of
he squishes it back. Yeah. Like when you take Play-Doh and you stretch it out too thin, and you're like, well, that's not going to work anymore. Now it's tearing, and then you swap it back together. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's all I need to know is, like, the mechanism. I get it now. But yeah, so if you're not a part of our Facebook page, go over there and join and, like, get in on the discussion. Like, put in there what you think might be some potential theories that make sense to you in terms of our beginnings and our ends and even our in-betweens. But anyway, I just want to interject that because we're not doing commercials. But yeah, let's get back to the discussion. We only have a few more minutes. What else do you guys want to talk about in terms of the universe?
I remember last time we talked about this, and I kind of paraphrased what you two both said at the start. And there's a great Hawkwind song called "Space is Deep," and that whenever I think about the universe, that always springs to mind, because and I think it was meant as a kind of double entendre as well, because it's obviously deep as in vast, but also deep as in a deep philosophical concept. And it's amazing. I love it. I just love thinking about it. Like I've said, I've spent many a great hour doing kind of these thought experiments as to what it would be like sat lonely. And when I say spent many a great hour, I literally mean on the top of a mountain in Scotland on my own for a week, sat meditating. So, and this is stuff I've kind of seriously gone into my own kind of consciousness about and thought about.
All right, so what truths have you discovered about the universe deep in your consciousness? Because you should write a book and make a religion about it. Damn it.
None, because I'm not naive enough to think that my own consciousness is any kind of
humility is what you learned from that.
You could have been a multi-gazillionaire by now on the back of that religion.
I could if I was kind of that way inclined to just talk bullshit and try and market myself as something that I'm not, but I'm not that kind of person.
That's the tagline.
I'm not a psychic.
The type of person that thinks that external knowledge can be gained from internal reflection. Yeah. No, I think that's crazy. As we come to the end of the show, like there's one thing that I wanted to bring up as my last point, and then I want to give it to you guys for your last points. But we keep saying things like the universe is big, right? It's like incomprehensible. And then you start thinking about quantum physics and like the small, how incredibly small can really get. And these are numbers that we can't really comprehend. But then when you think about big and small, like they're only in comparison to us, right? Like we're very egocentric in our views of science, because it's really from the perspective of us as human beings, our scale, our size, like what seems normal to us. And if you think about like us from the perspective of an ant, and like an ant in the perspective of a bacteria, right? Those are massive freaking things from those perspectives. And so for me, like I have to keep reminding myself, like space is big from my perspective, right? And like atoms and stuff get small from my perspective. But what are your guys' thoughts on that? Like just how much our own language and our own perception can really limit our understanding of things.
I think because like historically, obviously, we've only as a species known about the whole universe being the world around us, really. That's where everything started. The world around us was the universe to us. And now our knowledge and understanding of that is greatly expanding very, very rapidly. And so, it completely makes sense to me that our sort of frame of reference for the size of things is us and the things around us. But then again, it brings me back to those existential crises where I'm walking down the pavement, down the street or something, and I'm like, gosh, all of this is meaningless because we're so tiny. Why am I worried about how much change I've got in my pocket for the bus when like the universe is so big and I'm just this like tiny speck on this tiny planet around a tiny star, and it all seems pointless and meaningless. But then we are, like you say, giants compared to some things that are going on. You look at a drop of water under a microscope and there's a whole world going on in there that we never even see. And I think we're only as big as we kind of need to be. Yes, we are small compared to the universe. We are infinitely tiny and completely not worth giving a damn about. But we are also giants who can make the biggest differences to people's lives, or giants who can make
other creatures' lives.
Yeah, or the creatures' lives and the future of the planet and all those sorts of things. And I think it's hard to not get swept away in the gigantic, awesome craziness of the universe. Mm-hmm. But we can and we should, and just keep striving to learn more and do more and keep doing better.
I think, look, I first and foremost a skeptic, and whenever I think of, because as I mentioned earlier, I've got a great kind of layperson's interest in cosmology. I've also got a very kind of great layperson's interest, but with slightly more understanding in neurology. And I think whenever we're talking about perspectives, we for me, it comes back to neurology, and neurology for me informs. It really does inform skepticism. How our brains work and how we interact with the world informs skepticism. And we can only work with our shared reality. Because when you get to the kind of microcosmic scale of things, what we perceive as reality is entirely false. Mm-hmm. So we have to work with what we've got. And what we have is a shared reality between the person I perceive myself to be, and Laura and Richard and every other human being on the planet and every other sentient being on the planet. So we have to work within that shared reality. And that shared reality to me says space is deep. Space is big. Space is vast. Space is hard to understand. And I don't think you can go far wrong from, and I think Richard alluded to this as well, retaining some of that mystery is not a bad thing. It's inspiring. It leads us to do better as individuals and as a community who want to learn more about the universe we live in. And that for me is kind of the driving force behind everything I do and who I am.
I love it. I love how it puts us in perspective of like where we fit into things. We're not the biggest, we're not the smallest. We might currently be the smartest on this planet. We might not be, depending on what you determine, intelligence is.
Octopus was a very smart.
Exactly. Like let's define some things. But yeah, like kind of putting us in our places. It's a very humbling experience, but that is where kind of secular scientific awe comes from. It doesn't come from like belief in a god or like magic or these things that are outside the scope of reality, but still real. It really comes from no. Reality itself is fascinating, and
you don't need anything else.
We fit into it in this particular tiny little nook, but we're at a nook where we get to look up at the big and we get to look down at the small, and we get to kind of see both. Like, imagine not being able to have either one of those perspectives and how little we would know, and we just make these leaps and conclusions like we did in the past. Like, we are capable of, you're right, like there's so much we don't even have the tools or measurements or like measuring devices to perceive reality. We have like the electromagnetic spectrum, and then we have these devices that can measure these other things, right? But we can only perceive and measure and see these like small bits and pieces of reality. And but by doing that, we get to look in all these different directions, and I think that that's really where our awe comes from, and I love it. I think it's really, really cool.
In particular, I think one direction that people should look in is our link tree, which has links to all of the places where you can find our podcast in big places and small places.
Fantastic tie-in.
And I said the other week, if you're sick of seeing our faces, you can listen to us on an audio-only feed on Spotify, SoundCloud, not SoundCloud. I don't know. I said SoundCloud. I should probably get us on SoundCloud. That's the place. Stitcher, etc., etc. And obviously the Facebook discussion group is on there as well to check out. Yeah, sorry, I just chucked the link because we were done, weren't we? We were done.
Yeah, no, this is perfect. Yeah,
okay, good.
Take us to the end, Gil.
Well, you take us to the end because I forget.
Okay, so one thing I want to throw out there is that we've been doing a lot of topics, and we have a topic list, but it's going to start running out. So I want to throw out, if you've made it to the end of this episode, it means that you're one of our listeners and you enjoy, or like enjoyed at least this one time, our podcast. So if you're hearing this now,
sadist. That's the term for that.
What is it? Sadist. And no judgment whatsoever. In fact, I appreciate it. But if you're here listening to my voice right here, right now, jump on Facebook and give us a suggestion or 2 or 10 about topics that you would like to see. And we'll do posts too to remind everybody, but we need more topics to keep this thing going, or we're just going to circle around to old topics or just start pulling things right out of our pockets, and you don't want that to happen.
No, but I think the old topics thing is really, because someone might have just come across episode 23 on whatever we did, episode 23, and thought, I really want to hear them, hear more conversation about this specific thing. Like, I'm desperate for this other angle of this topic that you've already covered to, have some more of that. So let us know if you want us to revisit things or new topics as well.
Good point. Yeah, someone had mentioned that, like, on our flat Earth episode, we should have had a flat earther. That hadn't occurred to us because the purpose of our show is supposed to be just like sitting around a table and kind of bullshitting about a topic. But that's something that we can do. We can try and find people who have specific interests.
You'll certainly
get
plenty
visit.
of bullshit if we get a flat earther on.
But it'll at least generate some more conversation. And if our purpose is not to like solve all the world's problems, but just to have the conversation, then I think that that's something that would be really fun to do. So if you have any more suggestions like that, throw them up on Facebook, and then let's get some more topics that you actually want to hear into our queue. Jilliver,
really
before we head out, is there anything else you wanted to say?
Yeah, I'm really into viewer suggestions. I'm really, really into the idea of viewer suggestions, and we have had a couple along the way. We really have, and I love them. I love them, and as the other two have just mentioned, if you want to repeat a subject, you know, as we've done tonight, we've talked about the universe previously with our very good friend Kyle Brewer. Go and check his channel out, Kyle Brewer. That is not.
I will include a link in the description. Yeah.
I was told off recently because one of my good friends, Sharon Davis, she suggested a couple of topics, and then I had the audacity to not be here on the weeks when we covered those topics.
How dare you?
I was told off
we'll have to revisit those topics.
Shout out to Sharon, and you know, if you want to suggest any more, we'll try and get Gil involved.
And I will go so far as to say this: as we're working on our schedule, we do still have a short list of topics. We just discovered that it's starting to run a little bit low, so I would throw it out there that I would like to prioritize viewer topics over the ones that we just kind of randomly arbitrarily threw on the list. So if you guys get those topics up there, expect to start seeing episodes about those sooner rather than later, as we can shuffle some of our arbitrary topics down later into the show schedule. So I want to try really to prioritize that.
If the viewers have any guests they'd like to see on the show, let us know, because the worst we can do is reach out and be rejected.
Yeah, and I get rejected all the time, so no skin off my back.
Yeah, there's great people out there in all different sorts of fields and areas, whether they be psychologists, neurologists, cosmologists, or just atheists, religious people, if you want to talk about a specific religious subject. If you know anyone, or if you know of anyone who you think might make a good guest to the show, shout them out, because we love having guests on. It really brings that extra dynamic to the show. And we've had plenty of the guests on. We've had Rudy B, we've had Kenneth Leonard, we've had Jenna Belk, we've had and we've got Kyle, we've had Kelly Laughlin, who's a very good friend of mine. We've got some great guests coming up. Well, I'm not going to reveal to you. You're just going to have to wait. But if you want anybody to come on the show, if you're particularly kind of enthusiastic about watching people's content, certain content creators, and you want them to see them on here discussing our topics, let us know, because we will reach out to them.
Unless we don't like them. No. No, I like it. I like getting other voices on here. And so I'm going to wrap it up now. We've already discussed very, very little about a very, very big topic. We've discussed just a tiny bit about ourselves. So now it's time to hand it over to you guys. We'll post this up on Facebook, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts, feelings, questions, comments, especially as it pertains to some of the unknowns, like what the specific circumstances were for the Big Bang, how you think the universe is going to die, what you think it might look like right now, given what it looks like when we look at the sky. Like, those are some deep, deep, deep thoughts. So let's get them going and start talking about them. In the meantime, thanks for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Bye.